Hey yo, what a div, y'all. Let's get right into it. So, following the launch of the event, I've seen a number of comments and had a couple conversations really offline as well that have been centered around the dominance of Power Siphon and Lightning Strike, including the comment that's on the screen here. Which shout out to Exile Vessel. I'm not using you to make fun of you or anything. It's just that your comment gave me the source question for this video that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Which, that last sentence, they're talking about how Power Siphon should not be this much of the player base. It's making DD look balanced. And it's a pretty commonly echoed sentiment, whether about, Power Siphon and Lightning Strike, or like you mentioned, DD. We said this about Seismic Trap. We've said this about even like Cyclone and various minion builds back in the day. It's a very old sentiment that likes to find its way back up every time a skill finds its way into a position of dominance. And I enjoy every time it comes up because it highlights something that's pretty cool about the environments that are mired in competition in the way that they operate. And it asks the simple question: is it a bad thing that there ends up being a meta skill or two? Now, before we go further, we should probably establish a definition of meta, because meta is definitely a term that gets flung around a ton to describe a handful of different things that usually fall under the convenient backronym most efficient tactics available. Hate the term personally, but and it's not even accurate, but it's very effective. And I say backronym, by the way, because it's not where the term meta actually comes from, but it is, again, it's a mnemonic device for talking about what in the world it actually means. It's a very efficient way to play the game. I like to add one more layer to this. It has to be popular, right? Something cannot just be meta because it is good. That would just be good. That would just be powerful. That would just be OP, right? Meta refers to things that are popular and common, right? If you've played League, for example, you would never think of Anivia as meta, no matter if Anivia is sporting a 55% win rate or not, because people usually aren't playing her, right? That's core to this idea. And if you look at PoE, we have plenty of examples of this. My personal favorite example of this right now is Firestorm of Pelting. Insanely strong skill that people aren't playing, and therefore can't be considered meta. Our understanding of meta tends to come from things, say, like the PoE Ninja breakdown of how many people are playing a skill, or we just got the PoE 2 extended stats for how many people are playing each ascendancy, right? We use popularity numbers to establish meta. And it's not a perfect definition of the term, but what can you do? Terms in gaming and really just in your internet space in general never remain particularly accurate. This is the best we can do for making a good term of meta so that we can discuss around it. Now, when I first started working through this thought, and it's an old thought of mine, right? Like to talk about the problems with meta skills, or if there's even problems with them at all, I realized that there's a whole lot of performance metrics that go into it, but realistically, popularity is the only thing that really matters when we talk about meta. It's all popularity based. And that sounds weird because earlier I emphasized the importance of like the backronym most efficient tactics available. But what I'm telling you is that something would not be popular if it were not good, right? Like, you could argue that things are better than what is popular, but a thing does not get popular if it is not effective. I swear to God, this argument comes up in like Destiny 2 all the time, back when that game was alive, anyways, about like Thunderlord DPS and how it was this low level strat that was very low, like low point of entry. It was a very, very high floor strategy. But it didn't do the most damage, but it was very easy to get people to do. And the community always used to split on whether or not people should be talking about it. The realistic thing is it was meta because it was popular and effective enough, right? Effective enough. So things don't get popular if they suck is the thing. It's all about what people are willing to talk about. And in the case of PoE, that just means that if the build sucks, we would just all look at it and be like, wow, that build is ass, and keep it pushing. Or, maybe if it's Tornado Shot Occultist, you might laugh a little bit, right? Because it was especially ass, quite frankly. That was a different level of ass, quite frankly. Type of ass to make you go, God damn. Anyways, with that in mind, we need to talk about the things that actually make people want to talk about builds, right? Because we've established that it's a performance-based thing at the bare minimum. But how does it get popular? The first thing that makes a build popular is quite frankly the most boring, but it is what it is, and that's it being a league starter. It's expandable to low cost rerolls in concept, but to a much weaker effect. Like league starters just get so much more traffic on the internet than you really would think, right? Like think about what happens. A league start comes around, an event comes around. What is everybody looking for? Build guides to start with on the class or build of their choosing, right? You saw the Legacy of Freesia builds coming around. You were either looking for recommended build guide lists, or you were looking for a specific build guide for a type of skill that you wanted to play, or you were like, I really want to play a Whisperer. I'm going to go look for Whisperer build guides, Wild Speaker build guides. You probably found my Penance Brand stuff looking for a Penance Brand Dissipation build guide for League Start, right? League Starter, first and foremost, is just a search query that gets so many hits. And it's not to say that these builds aren't good, right? But more specifically, the ones that are good are going to be heavily pushed through timing and keywords, right? Again, releasing this build at a peak of traffic right before a league starts or an event starts. And again, using that keyword phrasing, league starter and build guide. Now, on that note, I would say these are the most important builds to actually have be good in the game. And it's just because the quality of your league start almost entirely makes or breaks how you feel about the game on a league to league basis or an event to event basis. Like you straight up think about all the times that you've had a bad league start and been like, man, fuck this game. And you ain't got a front because I've been through it too. Like we had all been through it. You have a league start that sucks. You're like, I don't want to play this shit no more. I'm going to do something else, right? It is what it is. And that's why we do so much testing on really painful versions of these starters that honestly underrepresent what the character could even be at that point in softcore trade. It's why we're so rigorous as a community in our evaluation of these league starters and the whole like engine around it. It is because we know that it's an important part of the game to get right, and therefore also an important thing for those of us who make content to get right. Because if you get it right, your viewership just kind of goes pew, almost immediately, right? It is what it is. Now, of course, not every build that blows up is just a league starter, right? In fact, there's usually one or two builds that blow up and are just really insane farmers of the high value, very coveted farms that exist in trade, right? And at that point, the budget of the build is more just like a part of the dossier instead of the whole Carfax, to be honest. Sometimes these builds are league starters, right? Like Lightning Strike, Lightning Strike Slayer, Lightning Strike Warden from this league, for example, they just scale well, quite frankly. They scale well into a large variety of farms. Or you can look at stuff like the KBF clustering character that Paul Star was playing during Primary Settlers, which, he has a version of it that he booted up for Freesia, but like this got popular during regular Settlers, right? And you can see that was just a good farmer that people really took a liking to. But these are just examples within the past like 6 months or whatever. Let's wind the clock back even further, till about a year ago, which it's painful to say that it's already been a year. But talking about Castle and Stunned DD Chieftain, right? That self-ignite setup that we did for farming and Affliction. That was just a really cool build that was really cheap and easy to get into that happened to be insane for farming those Abyss Wisp abusing maps, right? That type of performance base you want to talk about because it was super efficient. It was perfect for the farm that everybody wanted to do, etc., right? And you can see this time and time again with different builds blowing up because of different farms. Think about Hex Blast and the popularity of Sanctum, right? Those are not coincidentally linked. You know what I mean? Sanctum, Hex Blast. 1A, 1B. When Blight was really popular, minion builds were really popular and they kind of went hand in hand with each other, right? Minion builds were also overtuned as hell back then, but the point still stands. Content and the build that farms that content always go hand in hand with one another when we're talking about popularity of things in the game. For a third category of builds that get popular, I had to call this in my notes language barrier builds. And it sounds weird to say it like that, but it's because they are sourced out of a region's primary language or languages. And it's important to phrase it that way because our understanding of the meta is pretty heavily defined by the idea that we speak English, right? At least if you're on this channel, you to some degree speak English. It might not be your only language, but you have to be able to understand me. Otherwise, I don't know how you're processing what I'm yapping about, right? And in my case in particular, it's the only language I speak. So for me and a lot of other players, I imagine, they're not really familiar at all with what builds are coming out from, European countries that are not written in English or Asian languages, right? Like those languages, I can't read and understand very easily. So I'm not, scrolling through YouTube, seeing their build recommendations all the time. So if somebody were to put those builds out in English, it might actually catch on like wildfire because suddenly English speakers can see what they've been working on. And that's one of the many secrets behind Jung's success in the past couple of years. And I say one of because like he's an insanely talented player and an insanely talented build creator anyways, but he also has done this intentionally. You can see it on his stream when he does this, where he's going through Billy looking for what other people have done over there that he might want to incorporate into what he's doing for us, right? And I've done a similar thing, not on my YouTube channel, but like when I tell people about stuff like deck stacking siege ballistas, I didn't get that information from the West. No, that build came from the East. It was an old Korean video from like a couple years ago that I saw that I was like, wait, this build is insane and never gets touched, right? This information is not always in English. And our perception of meta, even though I did talk about the usage numbers being a part of it, is sometimes conversation and frequency of conversation about the topic also helps us perceive something as meta or non-meta. And so this like idea of language also matters. Now, those previous three categories that we've talked about, those are what I consider to be emergent meta builds. They are builds that, have to be discovered through one way or another to find their way into the meta, right? Whether that be because they're insane league starters or insane for this really good farming strat, or they happen to be, just a build that was already nuts for who knows how long and found their way over to the Western market through, transcommunication. Those are all cool and all, but this last category is actually the one that really impacts these conversations and the one that makes you really feel like the meta doesn't change. Familiar builds. These are the builds that, just didn't get nerfed enough to pull them out of the spotlight. And I hate this category. It's weird to hate this category of builds because I benefit hugely from this. If you look at the numbers on my channel for my Penance Vandal Dissipation and Hexblast Mines videos, they've done insane numbers, quite frankly. And it's because they are familiar, known quantities. They are the builds that people already know work for the content that they want to do. And so they know to look for these things. They are the builds that didn't get meaningfully nerfed from league to league and therefore are worth looking up going into the next league, right? And so their existence bothers me because it stops us from exploring and discovering, because nothing's changing on league start, and league start is the most important time for, most people. Remember we talked about it earlier, how much traffic really comes through, how many people are really playing the game at league start. But if the old stuff hasn't gotten changed, why bother discovering anything at all? Maybe you add a little bit of tech to the build that already worked before, oh, I can't use Call to Arms Enduring Cry anymore. Oops, got to move to Accumulator Wand. Oh no, right? Like, why bother discovering at that point? And this question of why bother is the reason that people generally have disdain for metas in any games, but especially when we talk about meta skills in Path of Exile. Because Path of Exile is a fairly complex game that really prides itself on the incredible skill diversity and depth and ascendancies and everything that the game has to offer. And yet we find ourselves so frequently playing the game drilled down to its most basic elements, the highest performing quantities. And the reality of this, the other side of this thought, is that this game is that fairly complex game with all of that complexity of it, all of that depth available to it, right? But it also requires lots of hours of drilling and practice and study and work and study and all of that. I said study twice for a reason, right? It's a lot of studying the game to get a build feeling good from top to bottom. And it's not just the numbers that have to line up, right? You can't just go, well, I have enough damage or I have enough EHP, but you also got to play it to make sure it feels good, right? Do I actually have enough avoidance and recovery? Do I also then have enough damage and recovery earlier on in the game on the way to the promised land, right? And so, as such, we always trend towards the things that we have spent the most times learning. Just like how professional league players trend back to Lee Sin, even if it's not good, right? It's comfortable, it's familiar, it's something that we've already practiced and put in all the work for. And quite frankly, if somehow I wasn't, I could research it. And the same thing applies here in PoE because somebody else has already played this build and it has shown that it will do well and it did not get changed. I should research this build and I should learn how to play this build because it will do well for me. Then I can tell someone else and the cycle continues. So, all the way back up to the original comment that spurred this video, it's not a bad thing that this is what Power Siphon is representing currently. It's the skill that has been high performing all league. And even before this league, right? It actually started high performing in 323 after its rework when people initially discovered its pairing with Locust Mines and Fury Valve. It just, took till last league when Arrow did a build on it. And then it really went crazy at the start of this league with the base type buff to wands to make it so that you were basically perma crit capped on the build that really ballooned it out of control. But it's been strong this whole time. And the reality is that since it's been discovered as a popular skill at the start of this league almost 7 months ago, nothing has changed. So of course people are coalescing towards it. It's what we have footage on. It's what people have practice on. It is very clearly a high performer in many regards altogether is what it is, right? That's what we're here for. High performing skills that are comfortable. So now we need to answer the main question that I asked early on. Is it a bad thing that there ends up being a meta skill or two? Maybe. Maybe it is a bad thing because like I said earlier, it squelches discovery and exploration. But I'd argue that it is definitely better than the vast majority of the player base not knowing what skills they can rely on to have fun playing this game. I think, quite frankly, we get too caught up in the idea that of the fun of build making in PoE, and we forget that, the game PoE also exists, not just PoB. People want to actually have fun playing the game. And that's what meta skills do. And you can never avoid this. Ever. Plus, if we're being real for a second, diversity in the game is still better than it ever really has been. This past year of PoE, roughly, starting from Affliction onwards, has had some of the best diversity that we've ever had, right? Like, I remember 47% Cyclone. I remember 30% Ray Zombie, okay? We're not even close to that right now. And the last couple of leagues haven't gotten close to that, right? Outside of specific like race events, like, yeah, if you look at the Gauntlet, for example, and tell me that it's ridiculous that everybody played Power Siphon, it's Trickster into Ephemeral Edge, Lightning Strike, I will tell you that they are playing the game at the hardest mode possible. Of course, they're going to all play the same thing. They have one similar goal. They have the same goal in mind, and it's all hard as shit. Of course, they're playing the same build. Realistically, what we want when we talk about meta is for us to not repress and suppress other builds, right? It's not that the things that are meta aren't meta because they are bad, but we treat them as if they are. And this is a pipe dream of a desire because hyperbole in opinions just move mountains that balanced opinions will never be able to even maybe vibrate just a little bit. But that's what clamoring for diversity in games usually lends itself towards. It's a desire for us to appreciate the things that are not necessarily meta, not the claim that we need to tear down what is popular. It is for it to stop pressing down its foot upon the necks of the less popular. That's all my thoughts here. Yo, chime in the comments if you feel like I forgot anything, or if you feel like I said something really cool that you agree with, or that you're over here just like, actually, I think you're stupid as fuck. I disagree like crazy. Let me know down below, right? I just love this discussion topic. It's been one that I've been wanting to talk about on this channel for quite a while, and the angle finally presented itself for me to do so. Here we are, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know I enjoyed making it. If you want to extend this conversation, links in the description are to my Discord and my Twitch where we can talk about these things further. You could really get the full version of this rant too when I'm streaming and I'm just letting it all loose instead of writing my notes down so I don't make the video take 37 minutes, 32 seconds, right? So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one. Peace.